Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Mark Marquette, and so glad you're with us to stay curious in a crowded studio, and we love that. This is Tales from the White Room with Mikey Haddad in the red there behind me. Hey, Mikey. And he brought with him astronaut John David Bartoe. Dr. Bartoe, good to see you, and Louis Delgado, who's worked at NASA his whole career on the payloads. And this is Mikey's show. But I'm going to set it up for all you that love watching Stay Curious. We appreciate you watching on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and Spotify. We are the American Space Museum. For over 20 years, been preserving the birth of America's space age in its delivery room, Brevard County. Our museum is upside down because we're putting new flooring in here. Can't wait for you all to see it. We put some pictures on Facebook about that. But we're so blessed to have great people supporting us like Mikey, who brings an astronaut along with him. After all, one of 589 humans to orbit the Earth. Welcome, Dr. Bartoe. How are you?
Thank you. It's great to be here today. Should be fun.
Sorry things are a little upside down, but you got a taste of our museum.
Don't mind at all.
Don't mind at all? Well, I'm going to set up a few things here, and I'm going to turn it over to Mikey because, you know, we've got a few things, business to take care of on Stay Curious. And first off, we got a birthday. First off, we want to try to defray our loss of income here by selling you these endorsed Paul Cowley and Chris Cowley t-shirts, all right? And we're going to start printing them later this week and get the early orders out. There is the QR codes you can hit to get these beautiful t-shirts, and we wanted to remind you that if you want to support our museum with some cash flow money that we're missing while we're closed. But we've got a birthday today. Dan Burbank is 61. Dr. Bartoe, we love our astronauts. We love celebrating them. Your birthday, I believe, sir, is November 17th.
That's right.
In there, right. And so we've wished you happy birthday a few times on Stay Curious. Chris Burbank, Dan Burbank was born in Manchester, Connecticut, and he was a former Expedition 30 commander, 188 days in space. He also flew twice on orbiter Atlantis. So happy birthday to you, Dan Burbank. He is the second Coast Guard astronaut behind Bruce Melnick, who books the astronaut tours and booked your tour out there at Kennedy Visitors Complex, right?
You bet. I was just out there recently.
How is that to talk to the crowd out there? Marty, as we back off Burbank's picture there. Tell us a little bit about that experience.
It's fantastic. They have a great program going out there. Every day we go through a routine, actually twice we repeat this routine. We start out with what's called a chat with an astronaut, where we have a group that's limited no more than 40. Mm-hmm. And we just sit around with a few munchies and talk with the people who have come. No big presentation. That's followed immediately by about a 1-hour presentation made by the astronaut, and then that's followed by about a 1-hour autographing ceremony where you can get a free signature from the astronaut, and there's one on duty every single day of the year.
And it's fabulous, folks. I know some of you have seen the astronaut of the day out there, and very personal experience, something Delaware North does right. And Bruce Melnick, our good friend, is booking the astronauts out there. He took over for John McBride about a year ago when we cleared up out of that pandemic. So I've not seen you talk out there, sir, but I can't wait to next time that you come back to the Space Coast. And of course, we'll want to have you on Stay Curious when you do that to talk some more. I'm going to set up your missions here, and got to first embarrass you with the traditional what I looked like when I was an astronaut 37 years ago. In your high school picture there, it looks like, Dr. Bartoe.
Now, actually, that picture in the middle, I have done my best to scrub that from the internet.
Oh, is that right?
But you know that's not possible.
No, it's not, sir.
I've failed at that.
Yeah.
That picture was taken, let's say, a few minutes before I walked in for the interview among all of the principal investigators for them to choose who was going to fly. So I didn't have a really great expression on my face.
Interesting. A little nervous at the time, it looked like. But that's our 1970s hairdo, and it's but anyway, Yes, that's what you look like there, and your official NASA photograph there. STS-51F, folks, is this gentleman's mission. We celebrate the shuttles of July. Dr. Bartoe, we do that because we find the shuttle program has changed everybody on Earth, and I know you'll address some of that. You were an early pioneer in the 80s, doing things that are now 30, almost 4 decades later, being done on the International Space Station. And we can't wait to hear your stories about that. His mission 51F there, the next to the last of the month, is launched July 29th, 1985, the 19th flight of the 135 space shuttle launches, and the 8th flight of Challenger. And you're going to tell us what happened on that was the only time this happened that you almost landed in Spain.
That's right. You want to hear that story now?
Yeah.
Sure,
tell us about your launch there.
Okay, so of course it's an 8-minute powered flight to get up to orbit, and 5 minutes into that 8-minute trip, one of the 3 main engines shut down. Now, what had happened was in the engines there are temperature sensors that are checking the temperature of the engines, the computer's watching them, and in one of the engines, the temperature sensor failed. So the computer automatically switched over to the backup sensor, and then the backup sensor failed. And so the software in the computer said, if I don't know the temperature, I turn the engine off. So it shut down our center engine for us 5 minutes into the launch. Now, the woman sitting in the control center who was in charge of watching that, she saw what was going on, and she saw a sensor failing in yet another engine. And so she quickly had him call up to the commander, told him to flip a particular switch that would tell the computer to ignore all the sensors, and we'll see how things go from here. And they went okay. We did what's called abort to orbit. That may sound a little strange, but what that meant was we got into a lower orbit than we had originally planned.
And all went well, and in fact, you got to stay an extra day in space, I think, because of that.
That's right. That helped make up some of the lost time caused by redoing all of the planning.
And we're going to get with Mikey and Luis Delgado here to talk about the payload in detail there. But want to also got to address the cola wars, okay? In fact, I'll have you hold that. That's an actual cola can there. You got to tell us a little bit about that. Everybody's heard about the cola wars between Pepsi and Coke up there.
So this started out that by the Coke company. They wanted to do some serious research to see how could you deliver a carbonated beverage up in 0G. If you think about it, you can't just pop the tab on a regular Coke in 0G, or if you've got foam and liquid all over the place. So they put their engineers to work. They came up with this high-tech can. You can see it has a Teflon lid, stainless valve, had a pressurized bladder down inside of it. And then when you would take a drink out of it, the Coke came out just perfectly, as if you were drinking here on the ground. Now, this was done as a cooperative agreement between Coke and NASA. That meant Coke had to spend all their own money to come up with this. NASA simply provided the ride up and back. Now, of course, whenever NASA does one of these cooperative agreements with industry, they are always public agreements. So guess what? Pepsi heard about this. They came running to NASA and said, hey, we want to fly too. And the CEO of the Coke company said, we were here first. So now the administrator at NASA had to make a tough decision. He finally decided that we would fly both. However, we would drink the Coke first. So it was the first carbonated beverage drunk in space.
And there are missions 51F we have wrong there on the bottom, 41F in that wacky 13 missions that they had the government accounting office had to know what was going on in there. But the Coca-Cola mission there, that's why Tang is the choice for astronauts up there, right, Dr. Bartoe?
Well, particularly since we had no refrigeration on board, so they were both warm. They were not interesting at all.
Nice.
Let's get Luis Delgado in there. Tell us a little bit about yourself in just a nutshell of where you grew up
Yes,
and how'd you get in the space business.
I grew up in Puerto Rico. In 1969, I looked up when the astronauts were up on the moon, and I was sure I could see them, and I was looking up there. So I developed that interest in space early on, and I went to school in University of Puerto Rico, and at that time, NASA was always hiring in Puerto Rico, and I got a job, started at NASA the end of '83, and straight into the experiment integration group, and
with Mikey, right?
with Mike Haddad and a bunch of other young guys that we just were doing unique work at the Kennedy because we didn't have contractors to do our work. So we were in charge of writing our own procedures, which, by the way, were written on paper and pen or pencil. There were no computers.
Probably not pencil, huh?
Yes, pencil. I like to erase, so pencil. So, I mean, they gave me this job straight out of school with no experience. I just had some smart leads that would guide you, and there was always somebody to ask questions, and I was always asking questions. I'm still am.
Well, how's Mikey to work for?
Awesome. I mean, we had a great. Talk about the book. That was.
Well, I was just saying, as a boss and a
Yes.
colleague there. Yeah, Mikey
Awesome.
wrote this book here
Yes.
with Dave Shaler. We had Dave on from Britain a couple months ago on our Payloads with Mikey, and I've asked Mikey, that's what he wants to be called, because how many mics were in your group?
We had 4 mics in our office at one
Okay,
time.
I just want to clear that up. that, you know,
They call me Mikey and
that's
stuff.
right. He'd definitely be called Mikey there. So, but this is I've glanced through this book. It's a technical read, but then some of it isn't, and that's what we're here on Stay Curious to do is humanize the shuttle program. That is just its 30-year legacy will live on for a century or more of things that you did, I thought. And that's why we've got Dr. David Bartoe here to talk about the payloads with Mikey. I want to kick off one other thing about the mission. In our I love talking about the mission insignia here. Dr. Bartoe, do you have anything to do with this? As an astronomer, it was designed by Houston, Texas artist Skip Bradley. And
Yes, so-
you want to tell us the details of it there?
So Gordo, our commander, Gordon Fullerton, was a good friend of Skip's, and so he had him design this for us, and we wanted and kind of an unusual angle of the shuttle, make it look like it's really moving and doing something. And so actually Skip set up a model and put lighting on it, and then created from that his art, what he actually saw in the picture. And then, of course, since the mission was primarily about astronomy, you can see all the stars, and obviously the 4 solar instruments were important on the mission, so that's why that bright one is the one star I know something about, called the sun.
Oh, yeah. So, constellations Leo and Orion are shown in positions that are relative to the sun during the flight. The 19 stars indicate the mission is the 19th shuttle flight. A lot of hidden meaning in things that we love about our shuttle era there, isn't it?
You bet.
And so that's we wanted to mention Gordon Fullerton, your commander, died in August of 2013, 9 years ago at age 76. And your crewmate, Hennies, okay, Carl Gordon Hennies, died on Mount Everest studying the effects of radiation from space back in '93. And what's interesting about the crew, we'll see a picture of the crew here in a minute when you guys start talking, is everybody but Story Musgrave, this was their last mission. Though it was your one and only mission for you, Lauren Acton, and Tony England waited 18 years to fly one mission. And Roy Bridges, a pilot and former future KSC director, his was only one flight because of the Challenger accident. So, any talking about you guys knowing that, hey, this is my only time to do it? I'm going to make sure I do this or that.
No, I don't remember that particularly. I think the most important about our crew, which was pretty diverse, was that we had a commander who totally understood how to put a crew together. I mean, his background was a big plane pilot, so he's always had a crew behind him, and he knew how to create a tight-knit team, which is what you need if you're going to go into the vacuum space, live in a can. You know, you better get along with everybody, and you better each know what the heck you're supposed to be doing.
And this space lab was not a lab that they went into through the tunnel, folks. In fact, this is it in our green screen there. Mikey's going to tell you what's going on there in a minute. Yes, 7 guys in the, you got the upper deck and the lower deck, or mid deck, basically. So a lot of elbow banging, it seems like.
Actually, it turns out there was plenty of room because once you get in zero G, you have the third dimension. So some people can be up in the ceiling, some down near the floor, some on the walls. We had a lot more room on orbit than we did during all the training in the mock-ups.
Very interesting. Yeah, you got the ceiling you can walk on, all right? Wanted to ask a couple more questions before I turn it over to Mikey and his payload. About being a science nerd in the 60s, 70s, sort of wasn't a cool thing. I got picked on a little bit as an outcast, sort of. And now in the 21st century, space nerds are real cool cats. And I think the Big Bang Theory sitcom may have something to do with that. What do you guys think?
Could be, yeah. I mean, it kind of shows that, nerds are okay, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's such a funny show, and the fact that he actually acts like a nerd,
Yeah.
and everybody enjoys him. I think it has
Been Sheldon Leonard.
started to meld into people's minds
Yep.
that nerds can be fun too.
Yep.
Well, it's popularized the real things of science too, in a way. You
Yes,
know,
yeah.
I watched my share of it and seen them bounce a laser off the moon on
Yeah,
top of
they're
their
pretty accurate.
Pasadena.
They got good technical advisors.
Yeah,
Very good.
exactly. They do have good technical
Yes.
advisors, you say, on that show.
Absolutely.
Dr. Bartoe, you were involved with the early days of the space station after your astronaut career as the head of the program from 87 to 94, actually. Tell us a little bit about that experience and where we are now.
So in those early days when I first started actually as chief scientist at headquarters, and ended up about 20 years later before I retired as a research manager in Houston. And by the time I retired, the space station was still not totally built. So it gives you a sense for how long a period of time that was. But my main effort during that time was to try to explain to the scientific community that there was actually some really interesting breakthrough research that could take place using this zero-G environment, and most scientists didn't get that. And so it's taken a while for them to understand that. Now, however, we have a long line going out the door of scientists who want to do experiments on board the space station.
Well, and do you have an opinion about Russia's announcement that they're going to pull out?
Well, I think I'm up to my announcement number 13 or 14 they've made. They're going to do that, and then they changed their mind.
Yeah.
So I'm letting that one roll off my back.
Yeah, I think that's a good way. They're not going to take their Nokia back with them and go in the corner and pout, are they? I mean, up there, their science lab. It's got apparently a heck of a film studio on board there, too, for that movie they made.
Yeah, they just put it up there.
Yeah, they just put it up there. Well, we want to get to some solar physics now and your experiments there. But Dr. Bartoe, first tell us why our favorite star, the sun, is acting up, and why we should pay attention to that. And we could be in for some communication nightmares the next 4 or 5 years.
Well, that's the thing about the sun. It has a weather pattern just like the Earth that's here. And we've been trying to understand that weather pattern. And part of that is you have to start with the basic research to try to answer the question, how does the sun actually work? That's what the scientists try to do. And each time we get another clue of how it's doing things, that then gets fed into the people who try to make predictions on what it's going to do next. Very much like weather research leads into weather prediction here on Earth. And yeah, I don't know what you think of the weatherman, but I think they do a pretty good job, let's say, of predicting the next 3 to 5 days. They can pretty much tell you what's going to happen. We cannot do that well on the sun, and we'd like to be able to get to that point.
Oh, great. Marty, we are having a problem with our Facebook feed apparently for some reason, but we are on YouTube, and I'll post that after this show.
It's showing 0 views.
That people can go. Yeah, I'm looking back over here. So that's always our game here on the studio with a bunch of old dogs learning new tricks here. But so we are going to now kick Mikey. I want you to take over, and you gentlemen take over or talk about to get the launch up there. There's the beautiful launch of your Challenger going to space there. Outside of the anomaly with the engine, how'd you find that trip to space, Dr. Bartoe?
It's a great ride. It's a great ride. You know, a little hiccup on the way up, but it was kind of interesting when everybody knew instantly, of course, when we lost the engine, because you could feel the change in thrust.
Could you? Okay.
Oh yeah. And so then everybody was starting to feel, oh darn, does that mean we're not going to make it? We're going to have to go back home. We're going to have to start all over again and get ready all over again. And meanwhile, of course, Gordo and Roy up there on the flight deck, they were working hard to solve the problem, while the rest of us were wondering whether or not we weren't going to make it at all and have to start over.
Well, very interesting that you could feel that. I also heard there's like a thrust bucket, they call it, where you actually slow down and then speed up to go through maximum dynamic pressure, right?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. There's a certain point where you're still in enough thick atmosphere that if you go too fast, the vehicle can't take it and could possibly break up. So you actually have to slow down a little bit through that thick part. And then once you get past that and the atmosphere gets thin enough, then you can speed up again.
Well, gentlemen, let's talk about the payloads. Mikey, there you go, buddy. There's
Okay. Yeah, starting out here, what do we want to emphasize with, experiment integration level 4? This was all basically almost all the processing was done in a horizontal orientation. We had what's called horizontal payloads and vertical payloads. So basically, most of the Space Lab work was in a horizontal configuration. About the only time we did anything vertical was at the pad, being in vertical orientation. So out of many years of work, you'd only spend a couple weeks or so in vertical work. So this is basically pictures of the basic 3 pallets. There's a single pallet kind of a little bit towards the background, and then the 2 pallets tied together in the foreground. And this is what we started with. Okay?
Not much.
This is what we ended up with after level 4 integration. And it was a lot of work of fluid lines, electrical, components, boxes, and then the major experiments that made up the payload. So it was a lot of work to go from the basic pallets to what this was, kind of configuration close to what we're going to fly. Next one is basically, this is a graphic showing all the experiments and the names that may be hard to read. But basically at this point, I thought I'd turn over to you guys, because at this point to talk about maybe just a little bit about what the science was done, and then we can get into kind of how we kept these experiments alive, which is what Louis did, which is there is cryogenic, these experiments required the instrumentation to be at very, very cold temperatures, very cold, in the negative 400 degrees range. And Louis was the one that was responsible for keeping that healthy. And of course, John David was the one that, from the astronaut point of view, that worked all this. A lot of pre-flight work, and then of course the on-orbit stuff. So I could just turn it over to y'all, and we can run from there, and let me know when you need me to flip the charts.
Okay, just a general overview here in the lower left, you're seeing the solar telescopes. There were 4 of them mounted on a pretty intricate pointing control built by Dornier in Germany. And it could be pointed very precisely at the sun. A good analogy is imagine taking hold of a pencil by its eraser and pointing it at a quarter 1 mile away. That's how accurate this thing was. And then as we go toward the right after that, there's an X-ray telescope. That's the boxy one pointing straight up. And after that, there's an infrared telescope, and that's where the super cold temperatures were necessary to keep the detectors very cold, so they weren't just seeing the warm shuttle. And then all the way to the rear is what we call the egg. That's a cosmic ray telescope.
Okay.
And this is the whole crew here, including the two alternate payload specialists. They're in the front row on the left and the right. I'm sitting beside Diane Prince, who was my alternate. And the interesting part about the alternate payload specialists is they actually had a busier job than we did on orbit. When we were on orbit, we only talked to one person, and that is to the alternate payload specialist on the ground. Think of it, it's like the payload room's version of a CATCOM. So I would talk to Diane, but meanwhile, Diane has a headset on, and she's listening to as many different lines as she can stand, which is usually around 5 or 6 different people talking to her. Because if I ask a question that she doesn't know the immediate answer to, she expects to get that answer from somebody else who's linked in, and she'll get it in the ear, and you can't even tell she had to ask somebody when it goes quickly like that. It's a big job. I actually did that job on 2 missions after that, which we may get to one day. That's the 2 Astro missions, Astro 1 and Astro 2. So I can definitely attest it was a lot harder on the ground than it was in orbit.
Very interesting there, Mark. Remember this picture. We're going to see another picture that you guys, it's your photo set up there.
Right.
In there. That's kind of interesting in there. So the gentleman on the far right in the front row with the beard.
Yes, so he's now, where is he?
Who's that? That was one of your support people?
No, he's the other alternate payload
Oh, okay.
because we were on a 24/7 shift, so we were 2 12-hour shifts, so we had 2 of everybody, essentially, on orbit. You're seeing the 2 payload specialists in the middle in the front, and the 2 alternates on the right and the left of them. So Lauren and I each worked 12 hours, so it was around-the-clock operation.
All right. Next slide there. Get you guys going there. I love these pictures inside. Tell us what building facility you're in. And
Again, all this integration happened in the operations and checkout building in the horizontal orientation. Again, most of Space Lab, the integration and de-integration happened horizontally. And this is actually in the west end of the ONC building. What you're seeing here is what's called the VMA, Vacuum Maintenance Assembly, and it's getting lifted, installed onto the pallets that we saw in the horizontal orientation earlier. The reason I'm showing this, a couple reasons, is this box actually failed on the pad. And Lewis can maybe, when we get into the pad discussions, can kind of tell us what happened there and how we fix it. And one other thing I wanted to point out is behind that payload is OST-1, which is Fluon 41D, and that's the payload we're going to talk in August. So I want to show that. And then the people in the picture, the main person is Tony Ornelas, who's the person in the middle. Looks like he's standing under the box, but he's really not. He's back behind it.
ready to drop it.
And then Jay Smith.
Come a little closer.
Yeah.
2 more feet.
Just a few more. Yeah, that was when you can never be under a suspended lift. That was a no. And then one other person was Jay Smith, which is in the blue smock off to the left. So they were the main players for this box installation of the ONC. And then we'll talk about kind of what happened at the pad here in a little bit.
So why you dressed like that?
We always had to dress in smocks and bunny suits because the pristine of the hardware. You never touch flight hardware with your bare hands. We always wore the plastic gloves. Whenever you're near hardware, you're either in a smock, kind of like a gown, and you see the gentleman off on the right in a full bunny suit. That's if you're directly on the flight hardware. You had to be in a full bunny suit. And one thing about that is you had two configurations. One was like we have there with what we call the face hood, which is an open face. Well, like me, if I was to wear one of those, I had to have an eye hood because I had a mustache and beard. To where only your eyeballs were the only thing visible. Everything else is covered up. Again, to keep the hardware pristine. That's why we're just like that.
Thank you, Mikey.
Okay. All right. And then this is actually the plasma PDF
Plasma diagnostics
package. And this is the installation of it, again, in a horizontal orientation in the ONC. One of it, and again, I want to show this because there's an operation we had to do with the pad because of the main engine shutdown that happened during the initial launch of Space Lab 2. So I wanted to show this going in horizontally, then you can kind of get a feel what it is once we went to the pad and what we had to do there. Okay, I'll turn this over to this is kind of this is Louis' ball here.
Well, this is interesting. I just saw this schematic when Mikey sent it to me like a week ago, and I never seen one, but it kind of shows a picture of where you go from regular liquid helium, which evaporates at minus 452 something Fahrenheit. When you the transition, you see the line come down. The lambda point is that point where when you come to the left, you lower the pressure low enough that this transition happens from regular super liquid helium and turns into superfluid helium, which has different properties. And in fact, experiment 13's objective was to look at the properties of superfluid helium in orbit. The other experiment Mark mentioned, the infrared telescope, was the other experiment that required liquid helium constantly to maintain the sensors at that low temperature, because otherwise its own heat keeps it from being able to see things in the infrared. So that is kind of shows graphically what we had to do.
So that lambda point is about 2 degrees Kelvin, which means
2.2,
which means 2 degrees above absolute zero. At absolute zero, all atoms stop moving.
Wow.
Very, very specialized.
Yeah.
It is
process and thing Louis had to do to keep all that working.
Yeah.
And you have to take the equipment up with you in the payload bay to make all that work. And
But on the ground, which is what we're going to show next, how do you do that on the ground?
So the idea is once these instruments get to that low temperature, it's best for them to stay there until they finish a mission, because every cycle that you warm up and cool down, you could develop leaks, you could develop problems that they just, they want to avoid. Once they get to the stable temperature, they rather keep it cold until they launch. So we started in the ONC, which is what you see here, overhead shot of all the GSE ground support equipment we had to lay out. We had these specialized tanks, the helium doer over there with a red, the yellow frame around it. Those came from Marshall. They were repurposed from the Lunar Excursion module, the LEM module servicing. Came down from Marshall for that. And then they had to modify them to allow them to be pumped down. You had to hook up a vacuum pump and get this thing down to 38 torrs was our target. And that's very close to, pretty close to absolute, zero. And so the equipment had to be moved in place. All these vacuum pumps had to be connected very carefully, because when you're pumping down below atmosphere, anything that leaks, that air that leaks into liquid helium is going to freeze and make an ice plug. And there's no way of solving that unless you let the whole thing warm up. That ice melts, then you can start over again. So it was a very critical operation. And, we trying to get the timeline, because the experiments would run dry and start warming up after like 5 days. So imagine for several weeks, we had to be doing this constantly, filling the tanks from commercial doers that were shipped from Amarillo, Texas by truck. From those tanks, we filled these ground support equipment doers. And that's what we used to do the pump down and service the equipment. So I can't believe I got this job so young. And again, I had all these people watching, and I had a lot of people to turn to. But it was now I look back and said, man, that was crazy.
And it was very successful, Louis. That was a very successful operation. So
How
you guys
long
did
did you keep it down? Once you took it down the first time, how long was it down? Was it days, weeks?
Well, we did it in the ONC. We did it in the OPF. I remember taking all this equipment to the OPF,
Oh, then you
operator
did it
processing
again.
facility, moving all the stuff on the platforms, then going to the pad vertical and doing it all over on that payload
Okay,
ground.
so you basically had 3 events where you cooled it down on 3 different occasions, and then let it warm up in between them.
Well, no. The idea was to keep it cold, and in
for the
between
entire time.
in between
Okay.
servicings, we never pump down.
Ah.
We just put regular liquid helium at 4.2 Kelvin. We fill it up. It starts venting, and
Ah.
we keep it like that, venting at atmosphere.
I get
Maybe
it.
there's a relief valve at 2 psi that keeps
Yeah.
that.
I
But-
get it.
So then we just refilled
And
regular
keep it
liquid helium
the
But
whole
the-
time.
But the
and-
pump down was to get those last 3
at the
degrees.
pad to get at the pad ready to be. And then obviously when they got up to the space, we have the ability to open up a valve, and the vacuum pump is the whole space.
Right.
So that's how the experiment continued in orbit.
That's neat.
Very fascinating. Hope you all are staying curious today. With John Delgado there, a class of we call class 4.
Level 4.
Level 4. Level 4.
Experiment integration group.
And we've got Dr. John David Bartoe, astronaut on STS-51F, and Mikey Haddad, our payloads expert, wrote a book on payloads here. Continue, gentlemen, with this
Yeah,
payload.
this picture, I want to put this picture in. It just shows all the ground support equipment, all the kind of scaffolding, and all the different things we had to do to get around to be able to get access to all this hardware. It was just unbelievable that and you could just see how complex it is. And again, this is in the horizontal processing in the operations and checkout building. It's all pre-flight work. And so this is just an example of one of the payloads, and we did this kind of for every payload we flew. Okay, now this is the one where it's basically the full complement. This is in the level 3-2 section, again, the operations and checkout building. If you kind of look off to the right of it, that's where the crew is setting up, basically for the photograph you saw earlier. And so this is a photo from John David gave us this, and this kind of shows the whole payload complement. This is kind of how it was horizontally fully integrated. I just wanted to show that.
They're right there.
Yeah,
Uh,
on the right there,
beside,
getting ready for their, getting for the.
Dr. Bartoe there, yeah.
Get ready
Oh,
for the
yeah,
picture.
I didn't even see that.
Yeah. Okay, this is you gotta take it from here, John. This is-
Yeah, okay, I know. So how do you like the hairdo? Yeah, I mean, that was my 70s look that I was wearing in the 80s. That's the best I could do. And to my left is Dr. Gunter Bruckner. He was my boss. He was a principal investigator. He was a genius, and unfortunately, he passed away of cancer at a much too young age. And then farther over on the right on the screen was our software guru, Len Watson. And I got a couple of level 4 stories that are connected with this. One of the things we did in level 4 is we, the payload specialists, would be sitting at a console so that we could operate all the instruments down on the floor, and we could run through all of the display pages that we used for them. You would call them windows today, we call them pages. And so you could run through the various pages, be sure everything, all the communication, all the way from the instrument, all the way through the space lab equipment, all the way through the level 4 ground support equipment, all the way to the screen in front of me and to the keyboard in front of me. So it's kind of an end-to-end test. So running through the tests on one of my experiments, experiment 10, that's the one that Gunter and I actually designed. It's a new invention. And we came to one of the pages that was designed to simply display in a simple graph how accurate it was pointing in a graph versus time. And so I sent the command to open that page, and it was blank. There was nothing there.
Oh no.
All the other pages were there, but that one was completely blank. So there was a little pause in the sequence test that was going on, and about 2 or 3 minutes later, Scott Vanning came up and whispered in my ear, "Len forgot to write the software for that page."
Oh no.
So we cut a problem report for that page. Len stayed up late that night, wrote the code, and it worked the next day.
Yeah, kind of what John was talking about was a mission sequence test. What we would do is we would take actually a slice of the actual timeline
Yeah,
that they would see on orbit, and we do that timeline on the ground. We call it a mission sequence test
yeah.
to show exactly this is what they're going to do. The crew that are going to operate it would operate it. Us in level 4 would support them. And that's kind of what we did.
And you're doing it on the clock.
Yes.
This test, that's why it's called mission sequence. Very effective.
Yeah.
One more story about Len, and another example of the tremendous cooperation that we got in level 4 from everybody. It's during one of our other tests we were doing earlier, we had some kind of mechanism jam inside of our film camera inside the instrument. So I went down with our mechanical tech, electrical tech, and we pulled the camera out. We looked at it carefully, and this camera is about this big, so it wasn't like you're going to carry it off somewhere. And we figured out pretty quickly there was a little burr on the corner of a piece of metal that was causing the problem. My mechanical tech was a genius for spotting it. So then we said, how are we going to fix this? What we need is a file. So I went back up where Len was in the control room where, the keyboard was. And I said in there, does anybody have a file? and Len said, I have a fingernail file. I said, that's perfect. It's just the size we need. So we took that file down, filed that little burr off, and it worked fine. Meanwhile, all of the support team down there, the mechanical techs, electrical techs, level 4, safety, everybody was completely cooperative for what we were doing on the floor. It really went through quickly, and I really thank you guys for what you did.
You're welcome, John. Welcome very much, sir. You're welcome.
Great story. Great story.
Okay, this is actually a photograph of, once we were done basically with the horizontal processing, this is it going in the payload canister in the operations and checkout building. This is basically the last operation in the operations and checkout building, going into the canister. This canister was pressurized. Again, this hardware never saw the outside environment. So these doors would close, this canister then would be transferred to the orbiter processing facility. Whoops, what did I do here? Uh-oh.
We're burning up. We're burning up the internet there.
What did I do here?
What did we do there?
Okay, sorry about
Let's
that.
go back there. There we
Okay,
go.
there we go. I hit the wrong button. Sorry. And then so this is the next picture. This is it basically coming out of the canister in the horizontal orientation, going into the shuttle. Canister's on the left side of that photograph, kind of down on the bottom, and the orbiter is on the right side.
Marty, you got us some burning there. All right.
So this basically shows a reverse of what we did, coming out of the canister, going into the shuttle horizontally.
I see
Again,
it up there.
yeah, again, most of the work was done in horizontal orientation. Okay, so then of course from there we did whatever we needed to do in the orbiter processing facility, and then off to the pad. And here's a great picture of Louis when he's a young guy.
Yeah.
Go for it, Louis. What were you doing here?
So this is the level where we would access experiment 13, the superfluid helium experiment. The infrared telescope, which you see kind of in the center behind my head, we had the equipment for that on the next level above. So we had vacuum pumps running to the ground. I think this might have been like level 2 from the payload ground handling mechanism, and then on the third level above it, it was the infrared telescope. So, this is hours and hours in this room here. That took. I mean, we had an early shift that would come in and set everything up, so we could come in with the A crew and do the actual work with the people that were most familiar. So it took cranes to get that tank from the base of the pad to the 135 level.
This is
where
all
you-
outside. This is outside.
All outside, external cranes. We were, if it was too windy, we couldn't do it. So then you roll those things, all that equipment, pumps, 3 doors, all these pumps, all these big insulated lines. They're hard to maneuver. So we got to put all that stuff in place and keep doing it every 5 days.
Until launch, basically.
It's just nuts. So, but yeah, luckily, I don't know, there was one abort. Okay.
Yeah.
Remember, we went through this whole thing. We got this experiments ready to go, and everything is happy. Everybody's happy. When we do the closeout, they're gonna close the doors. They look down and they see oil on the aft bulkhead.
Yeah.
Of the orbit.
Of the shuttle.
The shuttle. Our vacuum maintenance assembly had leaked oil on the shuttle.
Oh, boy.
Huge deal. Mission manager get together and decided to shut down the pump. That essentially killed experiment 13. And the PI, if you remember him, Dusan Petrak, he's from Slovenia or somewhere, Yugoslavia back then.
He was so distraught.
Oh my God, he was like he was like that. He had a death in the family.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
anyway, we go through the launch and somehow we abort at the pad.
3
So
seconds for a
the
launch.
next thing I see is Dushan coming in. He's all happy that they aborted because now he gets another chance to get his experiment ready. And we did.
And so that was kind of one of the things did was the VMA, they had to pull out now the vertical orientation, which is never meant to be done.
Right.
So Tony and the team and those guys had to figure out how they're going to take this thing out vertically at the launch pad. Never ever planned. Take it offline, get it fixed, get it back in to make launch
In 2 weeks.
in 2 weeks.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was kind of.
Let me say, there's a crane inside that payload changeout room. There's an overhead crane, and all these platforms where we're standing, they will retract. You could pull all the platforms back, put the door in the center, lift it with the crane, extend the platform that you needed, set it down on that, and then do the next one. So it had to be done in a sequence because the crane and all that. So yeah, that was quite.
And
a job.
because of the abort, we found out this was
Another
the
great story.
PDP. This is basically the instrument I showed earlier being installed horizontally. Well, because of the abort, their batteries weren't going to survive. Their batteries are going to be dead before they on the mission or before they launched. So this is an operation with Tony Norells again on the left, Gary Bittner in the center there, and then Jay Smith, the 2 Boeing techs, and then Tony was our NASA mechanical. Had to come up again. How do we get these batteries out of here and changed out at the pad and do it all within 2 weeks? And so this is a picture of that being done. Again, never planned. How are we going to do this now? You come from nothing to this operation, put the batteries in, new batteries, and it was successful. Very successful operation.
And this payload was a lot of fun on orbit because it was actually a satellite. We picked it up with the arm.
That's right.
We
got
let it
deployed.
go.
It got deployed.
And its job was to measure the plasma around the shuttle because the shuttle, there's a little tiny bit of ionosphere left up there. And when the shuttle flies through it, it actually makes a bow shock in front and a wake behind it, just like a boat does.
Wow.
So we deployed this little satellite, and then the shuttle flew around it in front and back of it so that it could take the measurements. And then we also had, what was the number of the experiment with the electron gun on it? We
Don't remember this. Was so many
were
years.
able to shoot at it with an electron gun
Really?
to see how it would be effective. This, oh boy, Gordo loved this one. And it was really tricky because the only way he could point was he had to point the entire shuttle
Oh.
accurate enough to be able to hit this thing. And we had 4 shots at it, and he hit it 3 out of 4.
Amazing. Awesome. Just amazing.
Mikey, how these early problems, the first 20 shuttle launches being the 19th, unanticipated changing things out at the pad that you never envisioned. How did that play into the future of the program? Were these procedures written up and referred to later, for example?
Well, yeah, we would use those techniques to apply to other payloads, and then of course when we start planning, Okay, what has batteries? Okay, well, if we have another scrub, how do we get to these batteries? And sometimes later in the early phases, we weren't involved in initial design. And so what would happen is we would get them already designed. We have to figure out how to pull them out, how to get to the access to those locations. Later on, when we were involved in the design process, we'd say, hey, if you got batteries, put them somewhere we can get them at the pad if you have to. And so that was just one of the examples of things we learned from these early missions that we applied to all those future missions. So we didn't have to do this again. We would and there's a future mission we'll talk about in Space Lab where we had scrub turnarounds, and we found out that we had to have certain things happen in those scrub turnarounds. So we made specific requirements to say, if you can't survive more than 2 days between launches, we need to know that now so we can plan to do operations, because there's not enough time to get in and do all this work if you're going to be scrub and try to turn it around in 48 hours. So those are some of the things we learned. Yeah.
Thank you.
This is just one picture with, I guess again, with Owen Garriott and Roy Lester. This is the, let me see what this is. This is,
Skylab astronaut Owen Garriott there.
Yeah.
This is the JSD POC. This is
Right.
again during the flight.
Right. Roy Lester was the mission manager from Huntsville on this project. Really good guy.
And Owen Garriott, of course, was supporting there at the POC.
Being a solar astrophysicist like you,
Yeah,
you compared a lot of notes, I suppose.
He
on
was
the
very
Skylab.
interested in what we were going to be able to do in this mission. You bet.
This next one is basically in the very center there is Scott Vaughn with the beard and got the Coke in his hand. He unfortunately couldn't be here, but he was a major player in making Space Lab 2 successful. This is a picture of him with the Experiment 7 people at the JSC POC. And everybody had the shirt on, so I wanted to get, of course, kudos for Scotty because he couldn't, unfortunately, be here today.
Before you leave that, it's interesting that he's holding a Coke because so Donna was in this control room also. She was actually working the ground for my experiment, and she drinks Coke also, not coffee. And early on, a couple of the TV shots that were being broadcast showed somebody sitting at a console with a Coke, and management said, you got to ditch the Cokes because we have both Coke and Pepsi up there, and we're showing a preference by you having
Coke
Wow.
on console. It just happened to be
So-
random Coke.
So they started just covering the can,
Okay.
and still keeping the can. And as the mission went on, I think mission management finally loosened up a little bit. Said, "Okay, forget it. That's okay."
Yeah,
You
in
had a
fact,
whole week to contemplate that. Your long mission.
and one note about that, Donna Dawson, who was electrical, she worked level 4 engineering as well. She ends up marrying John David, and they're still married today.
Yeah.
So one of our level 4
great.
engineers,
Oh.
John David. And,
Awesome.
and then the last picture here. Oh, this is the second last one. I'll go and explain. This is Mr. Bridges on orbit.
Yeah. So because we had that abort to orbit, and we were in the wrong orbit, and our flight book with all the timing and what we would do every minute was just worthless. We never even opened it. So the backup was to get new instructions from the ground. And so we're talking 1985 here. The way you got that was on a teletype machine.
Yes.
It's the only way. So we would get about 20 feet of teletype each revolution around the Earth, while all of the planners on the ground were trying to stay 90 minutes ahead of us to plan the next one. And it was
Amazing.
a huge effort on the ground because if you stop and think about it, all we had to do was read the teletype and do it. Right? They had to plan it, get it all typed up, and send it to us.
20 feet times 16 orbits, every orbit. That's over a football field.
Yeah, then we
To go through. Where, did you have a way to stow it?
so we
8 days of that. Wow, that's over half a mile.
it was all packed. Well, of course, it was cut into sections and flattened out for each person, but it was all packed in the airlock that went out. Which because we just basically used the airlock for stowage on our mission and went in there, and we actually ran out of paper, but somebody was smart enough to pack an extra one on board. So we had the first occasion of somebody actually had to reload a teletype machine in 0G.
And then this last one is a good picture. This is go ahead.
A telescope.
Yeah, it just gives you a feeling of, we talked about this, the telescopes in the old picture when they were laid down flat. This is what they look like on orbit, pointing outwards with a beautiful view of the Earth in the background. And it gives you a better sense of the scale of the whole payload bay out there. You can see the X-ray telescope a little bit beyond it and even farther back in the payload bay.
Beautiful picture, beautiful picture. What a great conversation with these three gentlemen. Dr. John David Bartoe, tell us, looking back 4 decades from your experience of being an astronaut, it's got to be a unique thing because it was a brief part of your career. You've gone on to do a lot of great other things. How do you look back on it 4 decades later?
Well, I wish I could remember a little more about it.
Touche.
But we're all there.
Well,
But
the internet's full of it. A picture of you with your beautiful black hair.
well, obviously it's super fond memories, and particularly really a lot of memories about what it was like working here in level 4, and the attitude here in level 4 was just so refreshing to come down here and work with people who just wanted to make everything work and get things done.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
And they maintained that excellence for 30 years through the whole program, Dr.
You bet
Bartoe.
they
Wouldn't
did.
you say?
You bet.
That's one of the great contributions. So I'm going to pop in here in front of Mikey. Whoops, my hair's on bozo on me there. As we end our program, I've got a launch pad. Oh, that's green, so we're not going to see that.
No.
I've got a launch pass here on the NASA Cosmic 51F, though it says 41F there. Thank you, sir. Reach over there.
You bet. Right?
This is a delightful guest we've had here in our museum, and on Stay Curious, Mikey Haddad. Thank you very much, sir. You've
Anytime,
outdid
Mark.
yourself.
Lots of fun.
Lewis, you're always
Nice to-
welcome back
Thank
here.
you.
Okay.
Nice to meet you.
Great
And,
being with you.
and,
David.
we appreciate everybody here on there. So, thank you, Marty. Technical problems, but we'll overcome those, and I guarantee we'll be back stronger tomorrow. So, what we enjoy about our shuttle astronauts, they say time and time again, is they are in communities across America doing wonderful things to promote space and inspire the next generation, just like we do here at the American Space Museum. So, thank you, gentlemen, for everything.
Welcome.
On
You're
behalf of our
welcome.
staff here at the American Space Museum, I'm Mark Marquette, and we'll see you again to bridge the space between us.